Now I'd like to welcome Civic Engagement and Social Justice Fellow Jessica Auger. Come on up, Jess.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to get my PowerPoint up, but I want to say it's so exciting to see so many people excited about social justice and civic engagement. It's really an honor to hear that people are as passionate and interested about social justice as I am. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. As I've said, my name is Jessica Auger, and I was a Civic Engagement Fellow at Harlem Grown this summer. And I'm an Education and Urban Studies student. I'm a junior right now, and I applied to the program under the guise of health justice. So I'm interested in the way that communities have access or do not have access to health based on different oppressors and privileges in society. And a lot of my motivation for this came from being a City or Corps member in Little Rock, Arkansas. Last year, I served in a middle school right next to Central High, where the first high school was integrated in the 50s. And so I was able to see sort of the way that the community was impacted and the lasting impacts of segregation and desegregation in the community, and how there were injustices both within the classroom and different gaps of access within certain zones, and how the justice extended beyond the classroom. The first notion of this that I saw, I wasn't even interested in food before I came to Mableville Middle School, but I noticed that the school lunches were particularly processed and unhealthy. There was a lot of stigma behind eating lunch, because if you ate lunch at school, you were known as the free lunch kid. Even though 90% of our students were free lunch, nobody would eat because of the stigma. And it's a scary fact to know that 21% of our students rely on the National School Lunch Program for typically their only consistent form of sustenance. Despite this, I would see students shake with hunger every day, and I would see them not be able to focus. I would see them fail. I would see them skip a year back, and then 2, and sometimes 3. And that really made me aware of the fact that education isn't just coming to the classroom. Education isn't just being in a room. Education means that you're fit and you're able and you're ready and you're healthy when you go into a classroom. And so through this malnutrition, I really started to understand that academic performance is not possible if you're hungry. I've read research that says malnourished children are 7 to 10 times more likely to exhibit aggressive and oppositional behavior than their peers. Sometimes students can come to school when they're hungry and ace a test, but sometimes they get on the playground and they'll get in fights. Whether it's in or out of the classroom, hunger is having a huge social and emotional impact on a child as a whole. And so given this interest in hunger and given the interest in community food access, Harlem Grown was an amazing space for me to work this summer. Harlem Grown is a 501c3 startup nonprofit. This is the end of our 3rd growing season, and it exists within Central Harlem, and we have 3 different spaces. And Harlem Grown operates under the guise of food justice, which provides consistently accessible, fresh, sustainable, affordable, culturally appropriate food that is attained in socially acceptable manners. And food justice isn't met in Harlem right now. I can say from personal experience, the fellowship has motivated me and inspired me so much that I moved to Harlem this year, because I was so interested in the community, and I really believe that being a part of the community is a part of social justice work. You can't helicopter in and come up with a solution or provide some sort of service. I can't have a summer in Harlem and then leave. I have to have my summer in Harlem, and I have to stay in the community and fight for the needs of the community. Harlem Grown's initiatives can be broken into 3 different categories. Our community gardens, education programming, and economic justice are the 3 big areas of the organization. And so through community gardens, we have 3 different spaces right now. One is an education garden dedicated to our 3 partner public schools. We're both renovating green space and providing safe space for community events in those. We also have education programming, which takes place mainly in the education garden. We have nutrition and garden education for both children and families as well. And through our economic justice initiative, we just started a hydroponic garden system, the first in Harlem, I might mention, that gives access to fresh produce. We deliver half of our proceeds to local restaurants like Red Rooster and the Corner Social, in addition to giving employment opportunities to local parents that are currently unemployed. And because of my major in education studies, I worked mostly within the education program within my time at Harlem Grown. And I did a lot of curriculum development. So I comprised different resources for teachers so they were able to bring their information and this information into the garden so they could better integrate their lessons within the classroom. And I also did capacity building for organizational programs, so we had our own curriculum to work with. We also did community-wide nutrition workshops, which were the first ever for Harlem Grown. So we were able to have families and community members come to the garden to learn about different nutrition initiatives and how to eat healthily on a budget. And most of these initiatives were incorporated with SNAP, so we were able to provide health bucks to our participants as well. I also worked in youth mentoring, so I did garden activities and I created formal programming for our students. And that comprised of our first ever official education program, which was the Garden Club. It was a 2-week summer camp this summer, and it was probably the best 2 weeks of my life. We had field trips, so we would bring our students to different restaurants, and we did cooking demonstrations. We had educational programming in nutrition, science, literacy, phys ed, and we also practiced gardening skills every day, and the students worked in the garden together, and they really treated it as their own community. And it taught them character building skills, and it's life lessons and the sort of collective effort of being in a garden together that really inspired me. And they did an incredible job of working collectively and collaboratively to keep the garden safe. And in thinking about these big issues, I kind of wanted to bring it to a more current event. As I'm sure some people know, last week Congress cut $40 billion out of the SNAP budget over the next 10 years, which really, really hit home for me, especially knowing that we have health bucks and we give donations and coupons for our participants in nutrition workshops so they can go and access the farmers market in a more affordable manner. So in thinking about these big issues, I kind of stopped and I said, wow, I mean, what does this mean for Harlem and what does this mean for the United States as a whole? And I have to say that being a part of such an amazing community and such a great group of my peers and mentors as well has really given me a space in which I can grapple with these questions. And now more than ever, I feel far more equipped to handle them and to think about what's next and to think about how I can be a thoughtful activist within my community. Thank you.
Any questions for Jess?
Jess, I'm curious how much of the funding from SNAP goes to support these kinds of programs, like proportionally? I mean, would this be a serious threat to this program, or is there another way to identify funding sources?
I read somewhere that 26% of SNAP participants will lose their funding entirely, so I can imagine that that goes to a lot of families as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great, thank you, Jess. Sure. So it sounds like we can take a few general questions for the first session. I'd also just like to point out that we have this lovely picture up on the screen. The young woman to our far left, Jess Dobrovolsky, actually is unable to join us tonight, and we're missing her, but she wanted to send her energy and say that she's sorry that she's not here. Her biography is in the program. So there were 4 fellows that joined the Civic Engagement Fellowship this summer. So general questions for the group.
Hi. I think maybe not just a general question, but maybe a statement. Do you think, or I guess it is a question, do you think that maybe like with the cutting of the SNAP program and, you know, the long-lasting effects that we might see in the next 10 years, could it also be an opportunity for these types of programs to become more prevalent in other communities where if, you know, we're not going to be able to access these kinds of resources from the government or from anywhere else, where do you think the community is going to rise up and say, then we'll provide for our own?
I think that's an amazing question, and I think Harlem Grown is a perfect example of that happening already. The community's risen, the community's responding right now, and we have great efforts towards employing people in our community and getting food to the people that need it. But I think an issue that at least I came across with this summer in Harlem Grown, we wanted to do a lot, but we simply didn't have the capacity because in a startup nonprofit, you can't apply for many grants without proof of success. And sort of proving that children are doing better in school because they're not hungry is sort of an intangible thing still, and it's debated in science and in food circles to my knowledge. So while I think the community's risen, I think there's a demand for more funding and more resources to make that happen.
Ceci, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the types of social media that you found most useful in reaching the communities that you wanted to reach, because I know you tried many different things.
So I think that kind of depends on the campaigns that we were doing, but in general, Twitter is really good at reaching a large amount of people and sort of being really concise. So I think that for like pushing for like the Community Safety Act, the Twitter and stuff like that was really helpful because it allowed us to get the message out there about certain events or certain things that were going on, or about just the bill itself that we can put out to the people, and then they could plug in if they wanted to. So I think that while all social media is really important, it depends on the campaign and sort of what you're trying to do. Because if you're trying to get people to mobilize, I think things like Twitter might be good. But if you just want to be more connected as an organization with people, be more connected into your work, things like Instagram and Tumblr are really useful for that because they allow pictures that are more general, pictures of your organization, of the birthday parties in the organization and things like that. So it allows, so I think there's various levels, so it really just depends on kind of what you're trying to accomplish. So, yeah.
So why do you think a majority of Congress and the House of Representatives sees this differently? In other words, they have no problem voting to cut $40 billion from food stamps, and they have no problem not taking up the Immigration Reform Act, and yet they represent the majority in Congress.
I think there's a lot to be said about sort of the myth behind what developed in, I believe, the 80s of the welfare queen. I think there's a lot of blame and a lot of discussion of decision justice, which is an idea in food justice that people necessarily don't have the option to buy healthy food, but when more conservative lobbyists see it, they see it as, oh, well, you are going to make the choice to buy food that's not healthy for you. You're going to make poor choices, and so we have to parent you. We have to be paternalistic and cut these funds and these rights that you have. You have to earn them just as everyone does. I think we still very much live in a system that believes in the American dream and believes in meritocracy, that everyone does have an equal playing field, and that's simply not true. So I think there's kind of a difference in ideology that it all stems back to.
And with regards to the comprehensive immigration reform bill, I think we have, in American politics, a lot of these discussions are political discussions. A lot of these discussions aren't about the people that are being affected, but rather those that want to keep the power, those that want to maintain their offices. And so when thinking about these things, when the Speaker of the House, Boehner, sometimes I get confused with his name, Boehner, when he decides not to bring this up, it's not because he personally doesn't like the bill or he personally has qualms with it or his community. It's because he wants to keep that power, because he wants to maintain the political offices in a certain way that they are right now. And I think that's sort of the main critique of American politics as they stand right now, the fact that when we're thinking about democracy has been bought up, democracy has been monopolized, and so we are no longer in a place where the representatives are representing the people. The representatives are representing their own interests, and so I think this is kind of sort of that discussion about what is American politics, what is democracy, who is being represented when it comes to thinking about issues that affect communities that don't have as much money to go lobby or that don't have as much stake in politics. So, yeah.
But you can vote. So most people would say the Republicans are cutting their own, the The vast majority of Latinos voted for the Democrats, and the Latino community is the fastest growing section of the population. So you could make an argument that they're hurting themselves by continuing to poke a finger in the eyes of Latino community. So it's kind of interesting what you said, but it's almost like they can't overcome something because it's not in their best interest probably to antagonize a complete group of an ethnic group, which is what they're basically doing.
I think part of that is that they're thinking of this short term as opposed to long term. Short term, this is what they want to do right now. This is sort of the goal for right now. But long term, they aren't thinking about the fact that Latinos are going to become the new, Latinos and people of color are going to become the new majority and are going to have that power. So it's sort of like very in the moment, what we're trying to do, this is what we're trying to do, these are our goals, as opposed to thinking long term and about kind of the fact that Latinos are voting, and they're voting primarily Democratic. So that's been a critique of the Republicans, within Republicans themselves. They're not saying, well, maybe we do want to appeal more to the Latino community if we don't want to get kicked out of office, which is what might happen. So.
This is for all three of you. I'm just curious, your experience this summer with your respective fellowships, did it change your view on what you want to do with the rest of your life?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I originally applied to the fellowship to do something having to do with public health. My family is in that work, and it seemed like a pragmatic direction for me. I am passionate about it, but that didn't happen, and I ended up working with this awesome arts organization, and it totally just revitalized my conviction that art is not a secondary sort of fun add-on to social justice or to education or to health and wellness, that it is a primary vehicle for all of those things. And so I sort of being able to have these conversations with the executive director and with the youth and with the staff who are all artists and who are always asking, hey, how's your work doing? Like, what projects are you working on? What social justice questions are you asking through your artwork? That just like really put the like fire under my feet to continue advocating for it and to not sort of let it fall aside as like often happens in like public education, like where I come from. I didn't even have an arts class, so I am always fighting this sort of assumption that I inherited that arts was extra. So yes, the answer to that is yes.
Kind of on the lines of the notion of extra frills. I'm an education studies major, and I thought that maybe I would teach in a charter school or maybe I would work for the Department of Education, but bonding with the kids and seeing sort of how much exists beyond the realm of education made me realize that there's so much more going on in a student's life than just what happens at school. And what happens at school is the tip of the iceberg. And because of that, actually, a bit of our population is currently homeless or has been homeless before. And because of thinking about that and thinking about the issues that affect children outside of school, I think I'm more interested in going into homelessness advocacy and poverty advocacy more than education, because I've seen firsthand the effects of that, and I've seen how deserving and how amazing and how intelligent these students are, and they deserve the opportunity to learn just as any other student does. And those needs can't be met. They can't go to a classroom without being in a safe home, without having being fed.
That's a great question, because going into the fellowship, I applied with the intent of becoming a lawyer, because for the past 13 years, I was like, yes, I'm going to be a lawyer. This is what I want to do with my life. I want to help change the laws. And then during the summer, Latino Justice, as I mentioned before, is a civil rights organization. It's a legal defense fund. So I was there with a bunch of lawyers and law students, and I came to the realization that no, I do not want to be a lawyer. That is not for me. And it was a scary moment because for 13 years I've been telling my mom, I've been telling my friends, I've been telling everyone, oh yeah, after college I'm going to law school and I'm going to become a lawyer. And then when I had that realization, I was like, no, I'm going to grad school, I'm going to get my PhD, and I'm going to become a college professor and an author. That's what I'm going to do with my life. And I guarantee I will do it. So just, yeah, to answer your question.
Yes. So thank you all for your rich and wonderful conversations. In the spirit of Lang, I think we'd like to pause and invite you all to have some refreshments, meet someone that you don't know already, and ask maybe a fellow about their experience and have a personal conversation or get to know one another in the room. And we'll take 15 minutes to do this, and then we'll regather and hear from Stephen and Alexa and their health justice experiences with the Roy A. Hunt Foundation Fellowships.